Hello ladies and gentlemen, PlayAsia supplied me with this copy of this game, so if you want to support me and the channel, use the link in the description to go and buy something, and there's also a coupon code you can use to save a couple of bucks off your order. You'll be helping me out and hopefully you'll be buying something good. Thanks for your support, enjoy the show. Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I want to rant to you about for a little bit. So for those of you who don't know, and I'm going to try and say this entire title without laughing, because it sounds like one of those tongue-in-cheek titles that you see in modern isekais these days. The full title is A Girl Who Chants Love at the Bound of This World, which is weird. It makes sense if you know the full context of the game, but still, it's not a very attractive title. I think might have worked just a little bit better for the English audience at the very least. But anyway, this is considered to be basically one of the historical legends of visual novels. It is known to inspire everything from Steins Gate to Clannad, which is an odd set of games to have inspired, but there is a very good set of reasons why. Unfortunately, a lot of them don't really translate very well into the modern day visual novel market, where we've got games like Zero Escape, but we'll get into that shortly. The remake came out 2 months ago. Seriously, is that all? Yeah, two months. More like 3 months at this point, but still. Came out very surprisingly recently. Honestly, it feels like it's been months since I first picked this up. I got it as soon as it came out, thanks again to PlayAsia, by the way. And I played through one route, and then I kind of got bored of it and put it down while I was working on other things, and then next thing you know, it's a couple of months later, I'm like, I should probably get around to finishing that. PlayAsia did pay for it. So I picked it back up again, got through another route, then a little bit through a third route, and I just got unbelievably frustrated with it, because this game, the remake specifically, it might be helped out by the fact, the Saturn original version, I should say. There was a version on PC 98, there was also a Saturn version, and then there's this one later on. But yeah, this version has a few problems they did not fix, and a few problems they tried to fix and just kind of whiffed it. But we'll get into that very shortly. I'm just going to say that, yeah, if you didn't get what I meant by that little route discussion, I did not finish this. I tried. I had 15 hours in this game overall, but man, I did not finish it. I could not get through it. It is a quite long game. There is a YouTube playlist that has it penned at like 50 hours on regular speed, and even then that's being generous. So yeah, it's kind of frustratingly long, and I did end up looking up what happens in the ending though. Good God. Like, it was a bit of a surprise. Like, if you've watched this channel previously, if you've watched these rants on visual novels previously, you know about Muv-Luv and the fact that it goes from bog standard dating sim straight into like otherworldly science fiction mecha battles. This game has a very similar sort of thing going for it. I won't say any more than that. I'll save the rest of the spoilers for just a little bit of a discussion of the ending, because I kind of just want to rant about it for a couple of minutes. But for now, let's just go through and talk about everything else. I've got a big ass list of points here, so this is going to be a fairly long one. So here's the general plot. You're a kid, you're still in high school, or the equivalent of high school in Japan. One of the things about this game is that they have this annoying tendency to use like American things in place of Japanese things, so I don't really know what the deal is, but basically you're a high school student, you have a father who is a researcher who dies on a research mission, and he leaves you a time travel device, which a lot of people actually want, and you use this time travel device to escape from difficult situations, learn about what the people of the town are doing, who they are, and bang everyone in the process, because it's one of those sorts of games, you know? There is no, like, eroge in this remake. There is in the original, but there is not in the remake. And that might actually be a bad thing. We'll get onto why shortly, but yeah. It's a pretty standard adventure game style thing. Yeah. Talk to people, you listen to them talk, you get conversations that tell you about the world, and in between these conversations you are able to do things like examine the environment, look for items, use those items in order to unlock extra routes. It's all pretty simple stuff, although back when this game originally came out in like 95, this would have been huge, because this actually invented a fair few things that visual novels these days like to tout about. And that is basically the entirety of the gameplay. It is a visual novel, more or less. There are some puzzles that you need to solve, but I didn't actually get to any of them. I was following a walkthrough at one point, and it does mention a couple of puzzles, which I just did not reach. Apparently they're quite difficult, though. One of them, you actually have to sit on the title screen of the game for a while and wait for the answer to show up. It's a little bit bizarre that they make you do that, but then again, most people let look on the back of the CD case go, so we'll let this one go as well. Unfortunately, the entirety of the gameplay is a little bit clunky, and I think the majority of this is because of this whole time travel system. They call it ADMS in-game, and it's what they use for their time travel. Here's the general drill with it. It's not like a game like Zero Escape, for example, where you can jump back to major decisions, conversations, and what have you at will. You have gems, and you plop down these gems to leave save points, and you can jump to a gem at any time. And then when you jump to the gem, you pick the gem back up and you get to keep it. However, you have a limited amount of gems throughout the game, and these gems are required to save. So if you put down all your gems, you can't save again. You have to jump back and you have to grab one of your other gems. This is incredibly frustrating for a few reasons. The first thing is that you've got limited saves, but when you use all your saves, you aren't actually able to go back to the ADMS screen to load another save to get your gem back. You have to do this really convoluted thing where you go back to the title screen, start the game fresh, but you keep all your items, because you keep your items between saves no matter what you do. It's a lot like AI or Virtue's Last Reward, where you get little pieces of... The items are basically the keys, where you get pieces of information and unlocks routes for you, except you have to be a little bit more proactive with the items. But anyway, as I was saying, you can't go back to the ADMS screen once you've dropped all your save gems. You have to go back to the title screen, then you have to start the game fresh, and then it gives you an opportunity to reload a gem save. They kind of justify this by saying that the gems power the time travel device, so it's an in-universe thing. But considering that I can just go back, start the game fresh, and then load a gem save from there, makes it irrelevant. It seems entirely unnecessary to do. The second thing that makes this a bit of a pain in the ass is that there is an absolute ton of branches. There are tons of opportunities that you get where you can not only jump to different routes and meet different heroines and what have you, but you can also go on little optional conversations. And the game actually has a 100% completion bonus. Considering the fact that you can't immediately jump back to somewhere that you've already been and go down the other thing, and you have to use gem saves, man, it's a pain in the ass. Especially if you're going for the 100% completion and you're just trying to enjoy the game at the same time. Because if you're just reading the text and watching it go through, sometimes you can end up going down a path without even realizing it, and if you didn't put a gem down immediately before that choice, you have to go all the way back to the beginning, all the way back to your last gem save, and then fast forward through all that crap again. And trust me, for another reason, this is more annoying than you might think. So yeah, if you want that 100% bonus, good luck. You either need to spend an absolute ton of time making sure you get all the routes, or be really, really lucky with your gem placement. This also... yeah, that is basically the main reason why this game kind of drove me nuts, because I had this annoying tendency to forget to put gem saves down, and even then, since you're limited on the amount of saves you can make, you only start out with like 3 gems. You can earn more as you go along throughout the plot, but if you're trying to make sure that you have as many saves down on branches as possible, it becomes just a cluster of trying to manage all the things that you need to do in order to get 100% completion, and honestly, at this point, I just tell you to follow a guide, because there are more reasons why the gameplay in this is annoying as sin. However, I will give them a little bit of credit, because they actually added a couple of things in the remake to help you out with navigating through the game. Mainly, they added 2 things. One is that they give you this little list of things on the side of the screen, which are basically just locations you can go to that will continue the plot. And they also give you another extra little window that shows you items that are needed or can be used in order to move to another branch. Very useful stuff, which is why I'm kind of annoyed that they didn't go to the effort of overhauling the ADMS in the first place. I don't understand the entirety of the mechanics of the story, but it seems like it would be relatively easy to do something like let people jump around while still maintaining the whole ADMS jewel thing that they've got going on. Because you need all 10 jewels in order to get to the true ending. So it seems like you could come up with something to make it easier to justify being able to jump to anywhere in the story and not where you've put down jewel saves. But for some reason, they just decided not to go that way. And it's one of many decisions that have come out either bad or horrific in certain cases. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure why they felt the need to leave that as it was. Another thing that they really should have improved on in the remake is the way that investigations and conversations work. So, for the most part, you're clicking on either objects or areas of a room to investigate them, and you'll get a few lines of text, and then it'll go back to just, you know, pick something else, right? You can also have conversations with people where you click on them and they'll do a few lines of conversation, then it'll go away, and then you have to click them again to start up a conversation. The conversations in particular are really frustrating because whenever you have an even slightly lengthy conversation in this game, they will always break it up to the point where you will need to go and click on them again to continue the conversation when you can do absolutely nothing else at the time. There are a couple of situations where you'll need to do something like use an item or do something a little bit out of the ordinary, but for the most part, these conversations are just something that you need to sit through in their entirety, and they chop them into 4 or 5 pieces for some reason. I really don't know why they insist on doing it, but they do, and it's frustrating as shit. And this also works against the game's favor when you're searching a room, because there are multiple situations where there are a lot of things that you need to investigate. Only one of them will let you move forward, and it's impossible to tell just by looking at the scene. There is a fantastic example of this in the prologue, where there is a room that is absolutely full of stuff. We're talking like 24 interactable objects, each of which that have 3 lines of dialogue that you read by clicking on them. And when you click on them, you get like flavor text, and it doesn't really matter in the long run, and you have to click through every individual object. The first time I went through this, I got incredibly unlucky and I didn't find the actual object that you needed to use until like my last click. It was so frustrating having to read so much flavor text, especially when they like let you do things. Like they have that little window that tells you where you need to go, or that other window that tells you what items you need to use, and then they force you into these weird segments where it's like, click literally everything. And they do this a lot too. It's not uncommon. And the flavor text on everything else is not great. As a matter of fact, the entire localization is just, it's lacking in flavor. It's got a lot of flavor text and it's lacking in flavor. That's kind of unfortunate, really. It all feels a bit botched. A lot of the dialogue is really tedious. It's flat, it's unenjoyable, it doesn't really tell you that much about the characters. It does help to feel like different characters slightly, but not enough. I don't know if I'm getting spoiled by games like Utawara Ramono or Muv-Luv that do a way better job with their character writing, but this game just, oh man, it just doesn't do it for me. I don't really get that much into any of the characters. And as I said before, they have some weird situations where they don't use Japanese honorifics, they don't use yen, they use dollars. And there's an absolute ton of things like just irrelevant flavor text where you have to be constantly skipping through it. By the end of the game, I was playing with the game on auto and skip modes turned on, right? So I was having the text going as fast as humanly possible. And there are multiple situations where some of this text just feels absolutely pointless. Like, for example, there's a couple of conversations that happen early on that are exactly the same across multiple in-game routes, but the game still doesn't feel the need to skip it if you've already seen it once, so you have to force skip it with a key on the keyboard. I played this on PC, by the way. There's a few situations like that, and the most annoying of them all is it seems like the main character has like 100 different lines for I'm going to go to the coast, I'm going to go to the school, I'm going to go downtown. And you have to sit there and see them every single time, even if it's just simple transition text. And it drives me nuts. If I'm being perfectly honest, it drives me nuts. The amount of just irrelevant clicking that you need to do to get through all of the boring conversations, the pointless flavor text, the overwhelming amount of objects you need to click on in order to define just one that'll do what you want it to do. It's all just, I hate it. I honestly hate it. It's what drove me nuts the most about this, outside of the ADMS system. What else have I got on this list? Oh yeah, there's another reason why the text is a little bit frustrating though. Our main character. Our main character is probably the worst visual novel protagonist I have ever had the pleasure of reading lines from. He is obnoxious to a lot of people he calls friends. He doesn't listen to his father, even though it doesn't, like, even when he's got basically nothing else to do, he just sits in a corner and just looks away and doesn't bother to listen to anything he's got to say. And he would know a lot more about the situation he was in if he listened to him for even 5 minutes at a time. Like, a lot of the characters in-game have pointed out that he doesn't really know his father. He doesn't know what he was like. He never read any of his research. He basically has no idea who the guy is whatsoever. And it just becomes more and more frustrating throughout the game when it turns out to be more and more relevant. And this guy is just waltzing on through without a care in the world, when even the slightest bit of information about his situation and what he's doing would really help him out. Especially when it turns out that, like, even at the very beginning of the game, when he first sees a guy who pulls a gun on him in the prologue, he doesn't do anything about it. He's just kind of like, whoa, this is weird. Why am I talking to this guy? Instead of, like, running the hell away, you know, making sure to avoid him as much as possible, he just doesn't seem to have much of a survival instinct in the slightest. He seems like an absolute tard. I mean, the jerk with a heart of gold sort of thing that they usually have going on in these things is pretty in force here, but it's even worse considering that he just doesn't seem to have any likable things about him whatsoever. Also, he's an absolute pervert, even by the standards of these sorts of games. It's bad. It's really bad. It's honestly frustrating. It's not funny. It's not played off for any comedic effect. It's not even meant to make him, like... I mean, it makes him look like an asshole, but it doesn't also really help his character in any way. It just makes him look like an asshole. That's the worst part of it. Sometimes they use it for, like, a little bit of character... Well, sometimes in other games, I should say, they would use it for character development or comedic effect, but in this game it doesn't. It's just so blatantly obvious. Like, it's worse than it's like I'm reminded of Police Noughts or Snatcher, if you've ever played either of them. And god, this is getting bloody obscure. Well, not really obscure, they're Hideo Kojima games, but obscure by regular standards, where you always have the option to just bat at a lady's chest and they jiggle comedically. That's always funny. Like, they do it in such a way that it makes it funny, but in this game it just feels obnoxious and makes the main character a lot more unlikable, and that's the main problem with it. Not to mention it gets weird later on, where your stepmother turns out to have an attraction to you, because of course it's Japan. But then in the true ending, again, not much in the way of spoilers here, but it ends up devolving into full-blown incest, which feels so weird. Like, full-blown, blood-related, otherwise, like just complete one-to-one incest. Weird. Really weird. Just doesn't work for me, man. I hope not, but still, it's just strange. And as I said before, a lot of the girls fall flat. Like, it's not like a game like Muv Love where they've all got very defined personalities. It's not like Utawara Ramono where you get a ton of time with all the individual girls so you can pick out your favorite, even though you don't really get to pick a favorite in that game. You get what I mean. You get enough time to really get to know them and appreciate them, but these girls, nope. For the most part, nope. Like, there's this one girl named Mitsuki who is basically just blank. Like, an absolute blank. It's like, the only words I can use to describe Mitsuki, who's meant to be one of the love interests, is girl he banged previously. That's pretty much all I've got on her. Everyone else just feels like a bit of an enigma. And even after, like, 12 hours or so, the only girl in the game who's gotten, like, any sort of likability to her whatsoever is Ayumi. And that's just because she's just a nice lady. But again, Ayumi is also the protagonist's stepmother, so it's weird. And yeah, like, I played 12 to 15 hours of it. Like, my in-game time said 12, but Steam says 15, so, like, take whichever one you prefer. But man, it just... Compared to a game like Muv-Luv, where you only need a few hours to really understand what all the girls are like and how which one you would prefer, in comparison to this game where, like, 12 to 15 hours in and I don't have a bloody clue about any of them. It's kind of explained later. They do all get, like, good ends at the end of the game once you've gone through the true route and all that, but man, it's so weird. It's depressing. Really depressing. You know what the worst part is, though? And this is where I'm coming back to what I promised earlier. The original Yuno had eroge scenes. And that's what the games had back then, so it made enough sense to me, personally. Apparently, from what I've read about Yuno online, from people who don't like the remake, the eroge scenes actually added a lot to the characters in question. So, having them be just outright removed, like, I got to the end of one route where it basically just cuts to black, and you're meant to... Excuse me. It fades to black, I should say. And you're meant to imply that it happened, but yeah, so it's one of those sorts of games. It's like Neko Para. Yes, I have played Neko Para without the 18 plus patch where it just cuts to black and then fades back in later. But yeah, apparently those scenes added a lot to the personalization of the characters. So that's disappointing. That's really disappointing, actually. Speaking of the remake, though, well, what else does it do? It redoes the entirety of the game's graphics, and I've got nothing particularly wrong with the graphics. I played, like, as I said, like, the 12 to 15 hours of the game, and they look fine, if a bit bland and generic, but when you go back and look at the original art that they put in the PC98 and Saturn versions, I will admit it looks better and has a bit of a better style to it that this version just kind of lacks. It's not terrible. I'm not going to say that the remake's art is terrible, but it's otherwise just kind of unremarkable. Don't know if this changes later on when you start unraveling everything, but all the basic stuff they've got going is decent looking. Nothing I'd call bad, but nothing I'd call particularly great either. There is also a remastered soundtrack, but if I'm being perfectly honest, I didn't listen. I was listening mainly to the voice acting as I was going on. Apparently you can, well, I mean, in the options menu, you also have the option to swap to the original soundtrack. So it's not something I care too much about, if I'm being perfectly honest. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I've got to say. It's not much but negatives in my personal opinion, at least for the remake. I've heard that the fan translation is a lot better, but frankly, I don't think I could bring myself to play it. I already put 15 hours into this and I wasn't getting anything out of it, so... Yeah, whether or not I would recommend this remake, I don't think I would. At least not on a broad sense. It's fine for people who want to dive into a sort of historical artifact that's been brought up to date and somehow made worse in a couple of ways, but... I mean, it's not something that I would just recommend outright to people who haven't played visual novels before. There are still better options for that. Even with people who've dipped in middlingly, you probably haven't played all the good ones yet, so you know it's probably something you can just leave off to the side until you get more experienced in the medium. I will at least say the PC version runs fine. It has decent enough controls. You can press the F1 button at any time to figure out what the controls are for keyboard and mouse, so I'm fine with it being as is. There's a fair few options you can tweak if you need to, including turning off those little hint windows that they added so you don't get spoiled on where you need to go next. It's fine in that sense, but yeah, after struggling through it for 12 hours, I don't really see the point of playing it any further. I feel frustrated with the gameplay. I feel frustrated with the relatively flat dialogue. I feel frustrated with not learning too much about the characters in those like 12 to 15 hours. And considering this is imagine if you read a visual novel, imagine if you read an actual novel, and 12 hours into that novel, you still had no idea about any of the characters or their like real personalities. It's depressing. What else do I have to say? Well, I guess there's one other thing I can point out. So there is, as I said before earlier on in this video, there is a YouTube playlist of the entire game, the Saturn-based fan translation. Is it the Saturn one or is it the PC98 one? I'm honestly not sure. I didn't actually say in the video. It's probably PC98 now that I'm thinking about it, because doing it on the Saturn would be a massive pain in the neck, but I'd tell you to go play that instead. Just watch those videos. Put them in the corner, or just watch them as you can go. Put them up to 2x speed if you want to get through them really quickly, because it's like a 40-hour playlist. Holy shit. But yeah, I'd tell you to go do that instead of playing this remake, because you sidestep all the problems with the gameplay itself. You get a better translation, so at least I assume you get a better translation, but hopefully it would be better. And you just don't have to worry too much. You can just try and enjoy the story. Speaking of story, do you want to talk about the ending? Because, good lord, the ending. I had to go and read it as a sort of like text dump that someone put up. They gave the game a D-, by the way, because they thought the ending was an absolute cluster. And after reading through their analysis of it and then going and double checking it on TV tropes and seeing that it was at least mostly correct, good God, man, it's worse than Muv-Luv, where it just kind of drops something out of nowhere. I wonder if the reason why that Spike Chunsoft decided it was time to remake this was because isekai was taking off as a thing in like the West and the East, because this game goes full-blown isekai in the true route. It comes out of nowhere. I was not expecting it, man. And all of the characters turn out to be some kind of set of really important figures. Like, one turns out to be God. One turns out to be God but supercharged. One turns out to be a demon. One turns out to be a time-traveling cop. And the entire thing, like, there is some weird shit that happens. Like, the main character gets a wife who then gets bloody killed by... Well, she doesn't get killed by knives. She bites her own tongue to kill herself, which is a weird way to go about it, instead of going with the knights. And then you have a daughter who is... Not even kidding. Like, as I said before, full-blown incest. She is into you for some reason. It makes no sense. It just comes out of nowhere. It doesn't seem like something he'd... Like, as much of a pain in the neck as the main character in this game is, I really doubt that he would raise his daughter with that kind of personality. I didn't actually, like, read through the ending proper, so I don't know if it was something that he actually encouraged, but even with, like, all of his bad traits, I can't imagine him raising his daughter to be like that. It's so weird. And then after just revelation after revelation after revelation, it leaves it on an open ending where you're just standing in a void, and you might be Adam and Eve, just judging by the visual stylings of the credits that are rolling, which is weird. It's just kind of like, what happens to them now? You just find yourself asking that question. And after watching that tiny little bit of the ending on YouTube, I'm like, yeah, I have the same question. What are they doing? Where are they going? But man, I gotta tell you, if that was the ending that I had spent another, like, 35 hours to get to, I would have been so pissed. I would have been really goddamn annoyed. But thankfully, I decided to just give up and go look for the true ending there and then. And while I can't say it didn't amuse me, yeah, if I'd actually gone through it, I probably would have been really pissed off. Oh well, so that was me talking about Yuno. I didn't actually spoil everything related to the story there, but I did spoil like the really big twist that you'd be in the entire game for, so who knows. Thankfully, I did at least warn people by saying, let's talk about the ending this time, but yeah, I'm pretty much done here. This has been Blue Maxima, and I'm recording this on New Year's Day, so, you know, Happy New Year, even though you won't see this for like another week or so. I'll see you all next time.